can't stand it. No. Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back today with a video I wish I had filmed last week in prep for the last 7 days of literal hell on earth that is the heat we're having right now, because I feel like it may have been helpful for some of you that have an ostomy and might be battling some dehydration, because that's where I'm at right now. It seems like everybody's experiencing a heat wave and I am hoping that it's gonna end soon. We are supposed to get some rain here in Pennsylvania today, hopefully in a few hours. That's why I'm filming in the morning, so hopefully there's no thunder or lightning in the background, but oh my gosh, we need a cool down. And our house does not have air conditioning downstairs, it's only upstairs, so it's really, really hot. Anyways, I'm gonna cover dehydration as best as I can with the knowledge that I have, mainly relating to people with ostomies, but not solely, because I would have loved this information when I was just a IBD patient without an ostomy bag. It would have been helpful for me to have it. So I do want to preface this by saying any of the information that you may learn in this video, please take back to your doctor, review with them, see if it's appropriate for you. They are going to be your #1 guide when it comes to dehydration, because we all have different needs, and I just wanted to throw that out in the beginning, a little disclaimer. Let's talk about how we get dehydrated, what are the signs of dehydration, and how to prevent it. So again, I'm going to be talking to you like you have an ostomy. You might not have an ostomy, but these tips, some of the tips might still be relevant to you, so don't totally throw out this video. But why do ostomy patients get more dehydrated? There's a few reasons. The main one that I always throw out there is a lot of the times when you have an ostomy, there's a lot of ileostomates out there, just meaning that we've had our colon removed or at least disconnected, and we're only running off of small intestine. One of the colon's main jobs is to absorb fluid and electrolytes, and when you take that out of the equation, you're just relying on your small intestine. It does do that job to an extent, but your body has to adapt and learn over time. So immediately after surgery is when you're gonna be at the highest risk for dehydration. This is before your small bowel adapts and starts to learn how to absorb a bit more and work almost like kind of like a colon. It's actually amazing what our body can do and how it adapts and how, like, physiologically your small bowel changes after you don't have a colon anymore. It is so cool and so interesting. So right after ostomy surgery, you may find that your surgeon, your nurses are checking on your I's and O's, your inputs and outputs, what you're drinking and what you're peeing and having come out of your ostomy. This can be annoying. I know, it can be very annoying, and it can feel a little degrading when a nurse takes a hat out of the bathroom to go measure it. I have been that nurse, but it's just important for you to check up on how dehydrated you may be getting. So what they often have you do is write down what you're drinking. If you are a rock star, you will write it on a piece of paper next to your bedside table. I loved when patients did that, so I wasn't like waking them up in the middle of the night to ask them how much they had to drink. It was just right there on a piece of paper. But yeah, keeping track of how much fluid you're taking in and then how much you're peeing. So they'll probably have a hat in the toilet in your restroom, as well as maybe a urinal for you to empty your ostomy bag in. This can be hard. I know. I never liked emptying my ostomy in a urinal. Honestly though, after surgery, when your output's a lot thinner and more watery, it's easier, but as your output starts to thicken up, as you start eating again, it gets harder to do it in that urinal, and then it just gets gross. They keep track of this though, because they're able to intervene if you're getting dehydrated. They can up your IV fluids if needed. They can push oral rehydration solutions on you. There are certain things that they can do in the hospital if they keep really good track of what you're taking in and what you're putting out. But you have to learn how to start to do that on your own if you're gonna go home. So that's why they're kind of getting you into the mindset of not necessarily having to measure your output for the rest of time, because I haven't measured my output in 13 years almost. I only did it while I was in the hospital. But it gets you in the mindset of recognizing what your output looks like when you're getting dehydrated and when your output is in good condition. It also helps you recognize, what does this cup of water really mean to me, or what does this cup of juice really mean to me? Usually there's some goal set by your surgical team of how much they want you to take in, how much you should be drinking, as well as what to stay under output-wise. They'll give you a milliliter amount of your goal to stay under. So you don't want to go over 1,000 milliliters of output per day. That's just an example. It might be different depending on where you're getting your surgery, but I feel like I've usually seen anywhere from 1,000 to like 1,200 milliliters of limit. So you don't want to go over that. If you do, you need to start looking at, okay, what other ways can we intervene? Your surgeon might put you on some sort of medication that can help with slowing your output. They might adjust it with food. They might adjust it with drinking or IV fluids. There's a lot that they can do to manage it. But once you go home, you've only got so many ways to handle dehydration. So it's really important to be able to recognize when dehydration is starting, but also recognize when it's too late and you're gonna need help from your hospital. You need to go to the ER. So I'm gonna talk a little bit from my experience of how I recognize, early signs of dehydration, and then when I've had signs of late dehydration and it was too late for me to do anything about it at home. So you definitely want to catch it in the early stages. Obviously, prevention is key, so keeping up on some of the methods, and I'm going to tell you how to rehydrate, but it's not always possible. Sometimes things happen, you get sick, you might get a GI bug, you might eat something funky, maybe your activity is doing something to your ostomy, maybe you drank alcohol, like who knows? There's so many things that can affect your output. But to know those early signs, like your mouth is a little bit dry, or you're thirsty, that's your body saying, hey, you might want to drink something. Your output might start to get watery. You might notice a little bit of a headache. You might notice a little bit of fatigue. What I notice, my signs, my personal signs that clue me off right away, my output is yellow and watery, and it starts pouring out a little bit faster. I'll have to empty the bag maybe 2 to 3 times in an hour, whereas typically I empty maybe 5 to 6 times a day, and I only let my ostomy bag get like halfway full, if that. So when I notice that I'm emptying more frequently and it's more watery, I'm like, okay, something's up here. I start to get a headache. Headache is usually one of my first signs. I'm very sensitive to that, so I know, okay, I definitely need to get something on board here to prevent this from getting worse. And I just get tired and kind of like, ugh. I get moody is really what I want to say. I get really moody. You also might notice that your urine output changes color a little bit. Typically you want to have like a clear to a very pale yellow urine color. But as you start to get more dehydrated, that color gets darker and darker, like amber, and then it can get really dark depending on how you're doing. So you want to make sure you're in that clear to pale yellow. But once I start to see my urine output get a little bit darker, I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. And this has really become second nature because this happens to me a lot. It really does. Sometimes foods just don't sit right, and I get a little bit dehydrated, but because it's become second nature to me, I automatically know the things I need to start doing to prevent it from getting to the later stages of dehydration. And those are the signs that are scary and you need to do something. And that something might be head to the ER for some fluids. So back in college, I think it was freshman year, I got really sick. I went on spring break with my boyfriend at the time, and I must have picked up a GI virus. It was later determined astrovirus, but I picked up a virus, and I remember the night before I got really sick, I was just like, oh, I feel like a little off, just a little off. And by the next morning, my ostomy output was just pouring out, like copious amounts of yellow, watery output, and I was emptying If I had the end of the bag open over the toilet, it would just keep pouring out of me. I also was throwing up, so I was losing fluids that way. My eyes got so sunken in, and I lost 7 pounds of water weight in a day. That was terrifying. I mean, I looked scary. I did not look well. Just like the eyes sunken in was the scariest. I remember getting up to empty my bag and finally looking in the mirror and being like, oh geez. So that was scary. Something else that happened was my skin was tenting. That sounds kind of weird, but basically your skin turgor, your like ability for your skin to bounce back if you pinch it, kind of goes away. You get really dry and you can pinch your skin and it'll stay like that. And that was starting to happen. That's how dehydrated I was. So it was just a very scary sign. I don't even think that I was peeing at this point. I don't think I had any urine output because there was nothing for me to have urine output. It was all just coming out of my ostomy. So because that came on so fast, I couldn't drink anything because I just kept throwing up. I wasn't even awake for most of this. I remember just being asleep on my side on the couch, and it just got to a point where it was like, there's nothing we can do. So I had to go to the ER, and I was admitted for a few days just to rehydrate because I just got so dehydrated. Now, usually at home you wouldn't be able to monitor this, but my heart rate was super high and my blood pressure was super low. And the way that I always think about it is if you have a water balloon and you fill it up with just a little bit of water, there's not a lot of pressure on the balloon walls. Like, it's kind of squishy. But if you fill it up with more water, then the balloon gets a little bit tighter. The pressure against the balloon walls is more because there's more volume in there. So that's what you have to think about, like the blood volume. When your blood volume goes down because you're dehydrated, there's less pressure. So that's why your blood pressure goes down, and then what little blood you have, the little bit of fluid volume you have circulating your body, your heart's like, oh my gosh, we need to get as much as we can out of this. We need to get the oxygen to the organs. So your heart is pumping faster, just trying to get it to work faster because there's less blood to work with. So that's why your heart rate goes up. So that's kind of how I always thought about it when I was a nurse. But that's what happened. My blood pressure went all the way down and my heart rate went all the way up. Those are serious signs of dehydration. Again, that's when you want to be in the ER. And as soon as they get that fluid going, they might do a bolus of fluid, which is just usually 1,000 milliliters of fluid rapidly. You feel it, like you feel better pretty quickly because your body needed it. Obviously, there are times when you cannot avoid this. You're gonna get sick quickly, something might happen, and even when you try to intervene with the steps that we'll talk about, you might not be able to dig yourself out of it. Which is unfortunate. I wish that there were IV fluids that we could run at home for everybody, but I don't have a way of doing that. I can't insert an IV on myself. I don't have the supplies. I don't have a port. I know some people do, but it's not something that I can do at home. So it's something where I know I can intervene sometimes. Sometimes it's too late, and I just get too sick too fast. But 99% of the time, I am able to prevent any serious things from happening to me by taking a few steps. And my first one is oral rehydration solutions. A lot of the time, people think that water is best, straight water, and it actually isn't. This is something that I wish I was better at explaining. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've looked this up, tried to educate myself, and I understand it in my brain, but I can't get the words out to explain it so people understand what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to say it in very basic terms of why water isn't just the best. Your body best absorbs fluids, your intestines best absorb fluids when it's a mixture of water, sodium, and sugar. The thing about it is, though, is that you have to have the perfect balance. If there's too much sugar, you wind up having kind of a dumping reaction. more diarrhea. If you have too much salt, the same thing can happen. When the intestines absorb salt or sodium, it's pulling water in, but to best do that, you get sugar involved, and sugar helps pull that sodium in, which pulls the water in. This is how I understand it. There's a whole thing about osmolarity that I understand it, but it's hard for me to explain, and I'm just terrible. I know somebody's gonna comment it and have like the perfect explanation, but it's all about a balancing act. That's how I think of it. That's why there are certain fluids that you think are really great for rehydrating, like Gatorade, stuff like that, but usually they have a lot of sugar, and that winds up worsening it. And I know that's the case for me. If I need to rehydrate, I tend not to get a Gatorade or like a Powerade because they have so much sugar in it that it helps the pouring out from my ostomy. So there are specific oral rehydration solutions that have been studied. They're available commercially, and there's more and more, it seems like, every day. I feel like I'm seeing a whole bunch of new ones recently. But things like Drip Drop, Liquid IV, H2ORS, Noon. Noon is the one that I use. I like it the best because it is the least sweet one available, at least the ones that I've tried. A lot of them, because of the amount of salt in it, they try to sweeten it up with different sweeteners, and they wind up being too sweet for me. And either it's too much sugar, so it just pours out of me, or the sweetener is not sugar, it's like an artificial sweetener. And it's just, ugh, like I don't like a lot of sweet things. I don't have a sweet tooth at all. So I really like Noon because it's the least sweet, but it's not salty. It's just a very mild rehydration solution. And that one is a tablet that you put into water. Some of them are little powder mixes that you mix into water, and they have found good balances with the amount of water you're mixing into them, with the salt and the sugar. And that's what helps you absorb them the best. And I know I've had to play around a little bit with them. Sometimes I add just like a pinch of salt to help a little bit more. Sometimes I add too much salt and then my ostomy pours out. So it's definitely a whole balancing act. And you may notice that there's also potassium in a lot of them. When you have diarrhea, you lose potassium in that. So that's why there is potassium in a lot of these solutions. And they are important for your heart function, so it's very critical to keep your potassium level balanced. You do not want to have a low potassium, you do not want to have a high potassium, so that's why it's included. But I also know that a lot of people have different restrictions, different diet restrictions, so they're on a sodium limiting diet or a potassium limiting diet, and you can't necessarily have these things, which is why I say, you got to check with your doctor about how to appropriately manage dehydration when you can't necessarily have all the ingredients. But anyways, there are recipes online too that you can get to make your own oral rehydration solution in case the commercially available ones are not available to you, or you can't afford them, because a lot of them are expensive, unfortunately. But there are ways of making your own. So I'm going to include a link below to a site that has a really good array of recipes using different ingredients, using orange juice, stuff like that. So hopefully that would be helpful to you. Just keep in mind to look at the ingredients on any oral rehydration solution, whether it be one that you make yourself or one that you're buying, just to make sure that there aren't ingredients in it that you cannot personally have. With these oral rehydration solutions like the Noon, it really depends on the time of year, what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, for how much I will drink of it. So in the summertime, I typically will drink at least one tablet in the appropriate amount of water once a day. So if I feel really like icky, if I'm starting to have those early signs of dehydration, I will up it to 2 a day. Like I said, it does get expensive, but it works. It works, and I'd rather pay for that than pay for the ER bill. And it's something that you may have to play around with a little bit yourself to find the right solution and the right frequency for you. Some people don't need to drink them every day. Some people are fine with what they're eating and drinking throughout the day, and they don't have to purchase anything special or drink anything special. I unfortunately am not one of them. My ostomy seems to have picked up over the years a little bit, and I'm definitely having to manage it a bit more. But it has become second nature. I've had my ostomy for 13 years, and it's just something that when I go to empty my ostomy, I automatically look at the output. If it looks funny to me, I know, oh, let me go pop some Noon in a water bottle and sip on that. You might notice I have this cup that I constantly carry around. I have a purple one and now I have a green one. It's got a little straw. You may see it in the backgrounds of some of my videos, but that's what I drink out of. And it has helped a lot because it's a fun cup. The straw is like a little boingy. You can boing it. But it makes me drink, so I'll take it. I don't just stop at that either. I don't stop at drinking. I look at the foods that I'm eating. When my output is increasing, I know, okay, we need to slow it down. And sometimes that means me eating stuff like oatmeal, pasta, breads, things of that nature to help slow my output so that way I'm not losing as much water through it. And I also was prescribed medication from my doctor called loperamide. It's also known as Imodium. You just want to make sure that if you get it over the counter, you're not getting Imodium plus simethicone, I think it is. I think that's the combination that they have. Just be careful if your doctor says, you know, just get loperamide. Make sure it's only the one medication and not the dual. But yeah, sometimes I will do a round of loperamide. Actually, right now I haven't had to use a whole lot of it. My output did slow at least a little bit where I can manage with foods and, you know, drinking appropriate fluids. But sometimes my output does increase and I do, you know, a few doses per day of loperamide, which is just an anti-diarrheal drug, and it helps slow me down enough where I'm not getting dehydrated. But that's something, again, my doctor prescribed me, recommended that I take, and that's something you have to check because not everybody can take loperamide. And loperamide doesn't work for everybody. There are other medications that do this as well. Some are a little bit more harder hitting, like the opioids, which I don't think they do a ton of anymore, but that is something that some people do use for diarrhea. There's a lot to think about with dehydration and having a stoma. So hopefully this kind of got your brain going, and when you're in with your doctor, you can ask them about this stuff, you know, what oral rehydration solutions would be good for you, what foods might be good for you, what medications might be good for you, how much output you should be having, how much you should be taking in, what's the plan if I do get severely dehydrated, do they have a system or something, do they want you to call the nurse in their office to let them know you're coming to the ER for fluids, or how is that gonna work? Some may have the ability to do like an outpatient IV rehydration. I have a lot of friends that go, you know, once, twice a week to get IV fluids to help them prevent dehydration. There's a lot to think about, so definitely talk to your doctor about this, talk to your nurse, but hopefully this got your brain moving and thinking about it, and hopefully we can prevent some annoying dehydration because it really makes you not feel good. Anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was helpful, and I will see you in the next. Bye, guys.